Today on Fear and Greed, the local share market tumbles as global inflation fears increase. Bio-pharmaceutical group Mesoblast gets approval for a new drug, sending its share price up 50% in one day. And don't be surprised if sashimi ends up on the Christmas luncheon table this year, along with prawns and oysters. Plus, international student numbers set to be cut, and Sydney to Melbourne becomes the 5th most trafficked air route. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Friday, the 20th of December, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, the ASX tumbled by as much as 2% yesterday following Wall Street after the US Fed downplayed the chances of several rate cuts in the world's largest and most important economy.
It was a very rough day for investors, with all 11 sub-indices ending lower. The tech stocks were hit hardest. The proverbial sea of red, Michael, sea of red.
Oh, dear. It's not what you want to see, is it? And it is like you watch the news, you watch the TV news last night, and it was just a guarantee, just red everywhere. It's a very visual thing.
It is. It began on Wall Street when the US Federal Reserve cut the official interest rate by 0.25 percentage points, but said 2 further cuts, rather than 4, are likely next year. Chair Jerome Powell said the Fed was going to be more cautious in the future, and that sent the S&P 500 tumbling 3%. The point here, maybe inflation hasn't quite been slayed as we thought. The reaction locally was swift, with US-focused companies or companies that have lots of earnings out of the US getting hit hardest. James Hardie Industries, for example, that tumbled more than 5%. Pro Medicus was down about 6%. Zipco fell about 10%, and Qantas was off 4%. By the close, the market was down 1.7%. That's the overall market, to 8,168 points.
Sean, it wasn't just equity markets that got hit yesterday. It seemed to be a fairly comprehensive bloodbath.
A very comprehensive bloodbath. Very emotive.
Another graphic image, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But that's right. The Aussie dollar certainly felt it, tumbling to just below 62 US cents at one point. Its most recent low is 61.69 US cents during COVID. Yesterday's move was very much on the back of a jump in the US dollars. Traders, when they are fearful, buy US dollars, sell everything else. Bitcoin also fell back towards 100,000 US dollars a unit. Iron ore futures dropped towards 100 US dollars a ton. Gold was lower. Also, the Bank of England came out and it's made similar comments to the Fed, dousing expectations of big rate cuts in that economy. You know who's looking pretty good here at the moment as a result of all this?
Is it the Reserve Bank?
It is. It is. They've been criticised for not doing anything on rates. Everyone else has been cutting. We haven't. And when you see what's happened in the US and in England, you think maybe they just jumped a bit too early. Maybe the Reserve Bank's got it right.
Suddenly, Michelle Bullock is looking more like Nostradamus. I don't know.
She would be insulted by that. She's got a great sense of humour, Michelle Bullock, a lovely person, but I don't think she wants to be called Nostradamus.
Oh, okay. All right. Look, just a quick mention, Sean, while we are talking about the Reserve Bank and what is happening elsewhere in the world, your interview that's coming up after the show today, you were talking to Sherelle Murphy, EY's chief economist.
It's a great chat with Sherelle about where we're up to as we end 2024, particularly around government spending. And does it actually matter that we've got these huge deficits coming? How do we pay it back? I think it is kind of one of the more insightful economic commentaries we've had all year, because she really does lay down just where we are and why deficits matter.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. It is coming up after the show, so stick around for that one. Sean, we talked about all the companies and the sectors that have been hit. One company that didn't fall yesterday was Mesoblast. It went the other way. Its share price jumped 50% in one day.
In fact, by the close, it was 54%. Quite extraordinary. The US Federal Drug Administration gave the green light to Mesoblast's cell therapy treatment, Riconsul. It'll be used to treat children for a life-threatening complication that can occur during bone marrow transplants. Now, there hasn't been a treatment for this ever. And there's about 1,500 children receive a bone marrow transplant each year in the US. Most of them are at high risk of this complication. In January, the FDA recognised Mesoblast's cell therapy Revascor, I'm going to get that wrong, but Revascor that treats heart disease in newborn babies. The company's share price is up nearly 900% this year, easily the best of the top 200. It's now worth $3.2 billion. Fantastic to see an Australian biopharmaceutical company doing so well in creating new technologies and treatments, particularly for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other corporate stories to get across today? I know that just feels like such an open-ended question, and it is high risk because it just gives you...
You've green-lighted me.
Yep, just go for it. You've got, 40 seconds to squeeze a few in.
Righto. Incitec Pivot posted a net loss of $311 million for the 2024 financial year, down from $560 million in net profit the prior year. That was on the back of the write-down of the value of two major plants. Its share price fell about 3% yesterday. Woodside Energy and Chevron struck a deal which will see the Australian company exit the $34 billion Wheatstone LNG venture. Chevron will pay Woodside up to $400 million in cash as part of that transaction. And AGL Energy will pay out $25 million in penalties after a court ruled the company had failed to notify and refund approximately 500 customers within the required time frame for centre pay payments.
That was like 41 seconds. You're getting very good at that.
Yeah.
Very precise. Sean, we'll take a quick break. Before we do that, I just want to mention some of the episodes that we've got coming up over the next couple of weeks. We've got essentially something pretty special. We've got 2 episodes every day, one morning, one afternoon. It is part of a special Fear and Greed summer investing series. So from Monday, twice a day, all new episodes, including interviews with some of Australia's best investors, telling us the stocks they're watching, the trends to keep an eye on, alternative investments, property as well. We're covering everything. And next week as well, there's you and me and our colleague Adam Lang taking a look at the biggest and best stories of the year as well. So we've got some terrific listening lined up for you over the next few weeks. In the meantime, Sean, though we've still got a fair bit we've got to get through today, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, international student numbers will be cut after budget figures released earlier in the week show that the government is failing to meet its goal of lower migration.
Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke will sign a new ministerial direction allowing the government to slow visa processing and limit the number of international students a university can enrol. The order will replace the existing Ministerial Direction 107, which spoke a lot about that during the year, and effectively introduces measures that would have been legislated had the coalition not opposed a bill in Parliament capping international students. Education Minister Jason Clare said the new direction would be fairer for regional and outer metropolitan universities, as well as TAFEs under Ministerial Direction 107. Lower risk universities, including the major group of 8 institutions, were given priority in a bid to weed out less ethical providers and education agents, I suppose. They were kind of luring students who were unable to support themselves, but they were getting paid as a result of it. Anyway, this new ministerial direction will replace that one.
Sean, ANZ held its annual general meeting yesterday, and investors are not happy, with around 38% of shareholders voting against the bank's remuneration report.
Outgoing Chief Executive Shane Elliott also voluntarily gave up $3.2 million in bonuses on the back of the scandal around the bank's trading floors, which are now part of a regulatory investigation into market manipulation. The allegations are that traders manipulated a $14 billion federal government bond issuance to benefit themselves and the bank, pushing up borrowing costs. That has really, there was a lot of angst at the annual general meeting yesterday with shareholders getting very vocal about what was going on there. Now, last week, Mr. Elliott said he would step down next year. Portuguese banker Nuno Matos will take the top job. They didn't have to vote on his bonus yesterday because he gave it up voluntarily. As it turned out, based on proxies, it probably would have passed, so he probably would have got the bonus, but probably, I don't know, it's very decent, but he sort of stood up and said, I won't take that money. The first strike against ANZ's REM report hasn't happened since 2018. That's the last time they had a first strike. Another one next year means the board will spill and directors will have to be re-voted in.
Seems quite the honourable thing to do, isn't it? And then
3.2 million is a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, and afterwards, when you see that it might have passed anyway, you're like, can I change my mind?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh.
Anyway, Sean, Australian officials have helped nearly 150 citizens get home from Vanuatu overnight as the Pacific Island continues to deal with the aftermath of two very significant, serious earthquakes.
Australian citizens were assisted home on Royal Australian Air Force flights, which had been sent as a humanitarian mission on Wednesday. A 64-person disaster assistance response team from Australia is on the ground in Vanuatu. The team includes Queensland's fire and rescue personnel and canine teams, as well as doctors, paramedics, engineers and communications technicians. The 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck on Tuesday, killing 14 and injuring hundreds.
And the Albanese government will reopen Australia's embassy in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
They will. Foreign Minister Penny Wong travelled to Ukraine and visited the site of the embassy, which was evacuated by the former coalition government in early 2022, shortly after Russia's February 24 invasion. Ms. Wong said that from next month, Australia's ambassador and deputy head of mission will return to Kyiv. Embassy staff and activity were relocated to Poland, but that move was only supposed to be temporary. Australia's arrangement became increasingly isolated and unusual as most other countries returned their diplomatic staff to Kyiv over the course of 2022.
Every female employee of BHP and Rio Tinto over the past 20 years will be invited to join class actions alleging sexual harassment after Brisbane law firm GJA Sadler started legal proceedings last week, Sean.
GJA Sadler lawyer Josh Aylward said he had advised two unnamed women in the filing of two separate claims, one against BHP, one against Rio, according to a story in the Fin Review. The legal action would be run on an opt-out basis. That means all women who worked for BHP or Rio since November 2003 will be eligible to register for the claim unless they actively chose not to. Mr. Aylward said BHP and Rio would be ordered by the court, potentially as early as February, to contact all former female employees and make them aware of their eligibility. The class action comes 2.5 years after West Australian Parliament handed down a bombshell inquiry into sexual harassment at mine sites. The process forced big miners such as BHP, Rio and Fortescue to reveal dozens of sexual harassment claims made by their staff.
Sean, Australia's Sydney to Melbourne aviation route is once more the 5th busiest in the world, according to data group OAG.
Yeah, and it's a very profitable route too because of the strong corporate demand for flights between Australia's two biggest cities. There were 9.2 million seats on the Sydney to Melbourne route in 2024 compared to, well, the top performer was in Korea, Jeju to Seoul, which had 14.2 million seats, equating to almost 39,000 daily seats on that Korean route, according to a report in The Australian. Only 2 of the top 10 routes in the world were outside Asia, Sydney-Melbourne being one, Jeddah-Riyadh being the other. That was ranked 6th busiest. 3 of the top 10 routes were in Japan. OAG expects demand for air travel to remain at pretty high levels. Corporate travel demand will gradually recover and compensate for any loss driven by revenge spend travellers. So we had a big boom after COVID. People were travelling all the time. That's coming off a bit, but corporate travel's coming back in.
Prawns and oysters, Sean, a pretty standard fare at Christmas, but there is a new style of seafood expected on tables next week, sashimi.
Kingfish, tuna, Atlantic salmon, fish that often feature in traditional Japanese raw seafood platters, are in hot demand, according to retailers. An AFR report says the Sydney fish market, which is the largest in the country, expects to sell more than 350 tonnes of seafood. That's about 3.5 blue whales in 36 hours of round-the-clock trading between Christmas up until Christmas morning. It includes 120 tonnes of prawns, close to 70,000 dozen oysters, and more sashimi, or fishes like kingfish, tuna, Atlantic salmon that go to sashimi. One traditional looking popular once again, Michael, is the Christmas pudding, apparently. David Jones is reporting a bounce back in sales of Christmas puddings. There you go.
Do you do a Christmas pudding, Sean?
Always. I have a brandy butter, which my grandmother and my mother, and now I like to think I've taken the mantle. And this weekend, in fact, I'm travelling out to Orange, where my mum lives. I'm going to have a Christmas lunch, and I'll be doing the brandy butter.
Oh, that is amazing. It is delicious.
Mm.
Do you ever put coins into your Christmas pudding?
Oh, it's a very old world. Yeah. They used to do that when they were, was it copper coins? Yeah, the penny farthings. It's sort of before my time, believe it or not. They were safe to put in the Christmas pudding. Isn't it now that the lead in the coins that you have now, very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it.
Oh, okay.
Well, your family still do it.
Well, my father-in-law does it every year, still loads all of these coins in. So
Really?
maybe just gradually. Everyone for Christmas, everybody gets a blood test to see what your lead levels are at. Goodness me. All right, good to know. International news now, Sean. New Zealand is in recession after the economy contracted much more than expected in the third quarter, and the second quarter was revised lower.
Gross domestic product declined 1% from the previous quarter when it fell a revised 1.1%. Now, GDP is about 1.5% lower than a year earlier, much, much more than expected, much worse than expected. The New Zealand dollar dropped a quarter of a US cent after the report. We talk about our Aussie dollar being 62 cents. The Kiwi dollar is about 56 US cents. The economy is forecast to recover over 2025 now that the Reserve Bank has started to cut interest rates. Consumer confidence is rebounding, but the nation is officially in recession.
The US government could shut down within days, Sean, after Donald Trump appeared to kill a bipartisan funding bill's chance of passing through Congress. This does feel like an annual thing now, doesn't it? That there's a government shutdown in the US.
What's scary about this, though, is that the agreement was already done. There was a deal done between House Republicans and Democrats. Donald Trump lashed out at it. The funding actually runs out tonight, so close of business Friday US time, which is tonight our time. Trump came out. He urged his allies on Capitol Hill to reject the foolish and inept compromise. Hours later, leading Republicans ditched the legislation. House Speaker Mike Johnson opted not to risk Trump's anger by calling a vote on the measure in the chamber. Steve Scalise and other senior House Republicans said late on Wednesday that the bill was dead. This dramatic collapse of the bipartisan deal just 2 days before the deadline just shows how influential Trump is. I mean, he was on social media. He was saying things like the only way to secure a deal would be to stop gap funding, then in capitals, without Democrat giveaways, combined with an increase in the debt ceiling, et cetera, et cetera. Incredibly influential already, Donald Trump.
And fantastic use of all caps in his social media posts.
Yeah, no one does it better.
No, certainly. Okay, up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Your guest today, Sherelle Murphy, Chief Economist from EY. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Friday, the 20th of December, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.